Welcome, and thank you for being with us for this second installment of Ask the Experts, part of the Y20 program established by the Mexican presidency of the G20. This is an opportunity for you to pose questions directly to those involved in the G20 2012 process. This time, we have with us Ambassador Juan Manuel Gómez Robledo, Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs and Human Rights of the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Gómez Robledo is a key player in the outreach activities of the G20 process for 2012. Ambassador, thank you for being with us.
It is my pleasure, Dr. Donich.
So following some of the questions that have been posted in our electronic forum, which is available at www.g20.org, I have a couple of some questions for you regarding different aspects of the issues of the G20 that you have been involved directly. So the first question we have is regarding the meeting that was held in February for Minister of Foreign Affairs. Can you tell us about the informal meeting and what is its role within the G20 process?
Well, thank you very much for raising this issue, because I truly believe that this is one of the most important innovations that Mexico has brought to this process. You know that by tradition, both at the G8 and thereafter at the G5 and finally at the G20, negotiations have been the sole responsibility of the Sherpas and of the ministries or the ministers of finance. And the Sherpas usually do not belong to foreign ministries. In that regard, Mexico is an exception to the rule. These people, the Sherpas, are high-level officials who are linked to either the presidency of the country or the office of the prime minister. And they have developed an agenda which is mostly devoted to address economic and financial issues. And this is only natural if we remind that the G20, in fact, was established at the level of leaders, of heads of state and government, as a result of the crisis, the financial crisis in 2008 and 9. However, the more we go into this new mechanism of political cooperation, the more foreign ministers have become aware that their own agenda is also very much linked to the one of the G20. In this globalized world, there are no issues that develop in a vacuum. They are all connected, interlinked to others. So Mexico and Foreign Minister Patricia Espinosa felt that if she convened a meeting of foreign ministers, she would give an opportunity also for these players to bring their own vision to the work of the Sherpas and of the ministers of finance. Of course, she did that without attempting in any way to replace nor to substitute the process that is led by, as I said, by the Sherpas and the ministers of finance. But rather in a way of complement the vision that those who are directly responsible of the G20 have. And it proved that it was a very timely and very welcomed initiative, because we got in less than 3 weeks a high number of confirmations. In fact, we not only invited the members of the G20, but we also expanded that list, not only to the special guests that we will have this year at the G20, but we went beyond. We even invited countries like the United Arab Emirates or Norway, because we felt that in addition to what characterizes the G20 as a group of countries that globally accounts for 80% of the GDP or 90% of the global trade, The G20 is composed mainly and foremost by countries which individually are very important players in the regions and globally are very important, very central players at the global stage. Altogether, you have a group of countries which I would call the indispensable countries, those who are always named and called whenever there's a problem, an issue that needs to be addressed at the global level. And well, the meeting, of course, only lasted 1.5 days. It went very well. They spoke in a very informal and frank manner about various topics dealing with global governance. And we realized that they would be very useful in unlocking those negotiations that at some point may be locked or blocked in a given negotiating setting. And let me conclude by saying that it was also very clear that the foreign ministers did not want to substitute negotiations that were going on or that are going on presently at the UN level, for instance. They only felt that their contribution, because of the political impetus that they may give to those processes, may be useful to unlock processes that need some sort of political impetus. In the end, legitimacy can only be granted by universality. And it is only through the universal bodies where you can achieve solutions that may last for the years ahead.
And you told us that some countries are not part of either the G20 or the special guests for the year were invited. Is this part of the widening communications, widening discussions that we can talk about during the presidency?
Certainly. This is part of a strategy, I would say, that Mexico has put in motion from the very beginning of its presidency, where we decided to include as many voices as possible in the process. Because we knew from the very beginning that in some parties of the world, the G20 is questioned for being a club of like-minded members or an exclusive club of rich and almost rich countries. So we felt that we needed, first of all, to bring more African voices on board. And that's why we not only invited Benin as the representative this year of the African Union, but we also invited a very important player in Africa, who's Ethiopia. In that regard, we also invited Cambodia as the representative of the Association of Southeast Nations, plus other countries like the ones that I have already mentioned. And of course, we put a great deal of emphasis on Latin America, not only because we belong to that part of the world, but because at this present time, Latin America has a lot to say to countries that are facing difficult times in their economies. Latin America went through similar problems as the ones faced presently by Europe, and Latin America, we believe, has a lot to show to our European colleagues. But beyond member states or beyond states themselves, we also widened the participation of international organizations. For instance, we invited FAO. For instance, the French had not invited FAO. We believe that the role of FAO is crucial for addressing topics like food security, which is a central part of the agenda. And we also led a process of consultations with think tanks. First time ever that think tanks have been involved in this process. Think tanks, the youth, the youth, and you know that much better than I because you were responsible for leading the process to the Youth 20 in Puebla in May. The business community, of course, and we have had already 2 very successful meetings of the B20. The unions through different, what we call the L20, the Labor 20, and of course, civil society. And we have had, as we did for the process leading to COP16 on climate change, a very important or very active agenda of meeting with civil society, both in Mexico and abroad. So this is part of an effort, an overall effort to bring more voices into the process.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how civil society is being gathered into this process, but especially what are some of the major issues that you've heard from organized civil society?
Most of the concerns are related to making sure that governments are not only concerned by resuming growth in their economies, but that now, after these major crises, growth be accompanied with very important targets in terms of sustainable development. Sustainable development for both North and South, for both developing and developed countries, where as the most suitable way to not only resume growth, make sure that jobs are created, but also in a way that is friendly with the environment, in a way of integrating 3 pillars that have been to some extent disassociated, the environmental one, the economic, and the social one. So that's a major challenge. Civil society is also concerned that because of these crises, developed countries may not reach the goals in terms of official assistance to development, and that some of the commitments made over the last few years may be eroded, with an emphasis, I would say, on food security. Food security is no longer considered by some of these NGOs just as an issue belonging to tackling the volatility of prices of commodities, but rather as an issue which is central to the overall strategies of development, a topic that will stay for a while in the international agenda, and that has also to do with positive developments. It has to do with the impressive development of the emerging economies, where people now are better fed than in the past, and that has had also an impact in the demand of food.
Okay. Now switching a little bit of topics, it's still about the overall discussions with other sectors, but specifically about the youth. We established the Y20 program, which was the first time that the presidency of the G20 actually established a program within the same framework as other programs like the B20 or Labor 20. But can you tell us a little bit of how do you see, or what's the relevance that you see in the youth participation in this process?
Well, I believe, first of all, that we needed to be consistent with one of the most concerning aspects of the present crisis. Those who are paying the price of this crisis are precisely the youth. When you see figures in countries like Spain, where you have almost 25% of unemployed, most of them are youth. And this is absolutely shocking, I would say, when you know that youth have never been better trained than in the present times. They have access to the best education ever, especially in developed countries, but I would say also in developing ones. They have benefited over the last 15 years from the revolution of information technologies, and they have become truly global citizens, and yet they are unemployed. And we very much face the possibility that those who are 25, 30 years old present now may be a lost generation. So it was only natural that Mexico put the issue of youth employment at the center of its agenda, and it was only natural to hear them. So through a process in which, by which every single member of the G20 selected its delegates to this meeting, we had a vast a group of youth who are truly representative of the youth of their countries, and they came with very important and fresh ideas, I would say, to discuss as if they were the leaders and to negotiate among themselves the terms of a declaration as the one that will be adopted in Los Cabos in 2 weeks' time. And it was very funny and interesting to see that the same divisions that we see in the real G20 were replicated in these Youth 20. So it only shows, it only confirms that they really made their homework. They came very well prepared. They acted in an autonomous way. However, they represented truly the positions of their countries. So we believe this is, I mean, we may think that it is only a fraction of the public opinion, all right, but it's still very much representative of the voices of those who may be the ones who are paying the highest price in this crisis.
Well, we have one last question, and it's a question posted by actually one of the Mexican delegates to the U20.
All right.
He states, considering that there are enterprises that are actually richer than countries, what role must transnational enterprises assume within the overall shared responsibility to respond to the world's problems? And how should they be involved in a binding manner in the solutions that the world needs today?
It's a very good question. And it's a very good question because it really strikes me how much progress we have made in the way we perceive multinational and transnational corporations. When I was a youth, I was trained to think that multinational corporations were the worst thing in the world. They were only seeking profit. They were only interested about exploiting the natural resources of developing countries. They were the finest expression of world capitalism, and they would never care about developing, about social development in a larger way. I have come to realize that it was very much about ideology in the midst of the Cold War, and it has nothing to do with what's going on in the present world. I would say, first of all, and the youth now know that very well, that in a context in which governments have limited resources, those who make research and innovation are precisely global corporations. They are the ones who may develop the tools, the innovation that we need for our development. More and more, we see examples of global corporations with a sense of social responsibility. You see that very much in the United States, but you see that growingly, increasingly, also in countries like Mexico. And I think that the more they are associated to these discussions, the better they will understand why governments at a certain point address issues in a certain way and establish certain priorities. For instance, when we were preparing ourselves for COP16 on climate change, we faced a great amount of opposition from the private sector in this country. They felt that we would be assuming obligations and commitments which were not fit for a developing country like Mexico. And they were very much concerned that this would be an obstacle to their business and activities. Through dialogue, they not only understood what the exact nature of the agreements in Cancun was, but they were associated thereafter to the negotiation of the law that was just passed by Congress and published by President Calderón. Now they are part of the equation. They are part of the equation. They are very much involved in the commitments that we have made through the law to, for instance, reduce global emissions by 30% in 2020. So I would say it is absolutely unthinkable nowadays not to take into account the positions and views of the private sector, especially if it has global capacity to act, but also because they are truly part of the effort to make this world a safer one.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for joining us, for listening, and for participating. We invite you to keep participating throughout the presidency of the Mexican presidency of the G20. Forums will be open, and please join us at www.g20.org. Thank you again. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Dr. Doncic.